Johnny McGonigal, Bob Flounders, Blue White Breakdown, Tuesday, January 30th, Johnny. I think you know what I'm driving at. January, almost out the door. The snow, the cold weather, turning the corner towards February. Things are going to start to get interesting. We got a Super Bowl to look forward to. We got a combine. I know you're looking forward to the combine. Winter conditioning's not that far away. Pretty soon, it'll be March, and they're going to be practicing. So, I before we get into a lot of Penn State football details, just your thoughts. I think I'm going to say that January is my least favorite month. I don't even know if it's close.
Yeah, Bob, I was just talking to someone about this like a couple hours ago. It felt like this month just dragged. I don't know. Look, I was able to, after the Peach Bowl, go to Florida for a
Yeah.
few days. That was nice. That
Yeah.
seems like it was months ago. Like months ago. Maybe it was the snow that we got that just, kind of
Yeah.
just makes the week feel longer. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned, the cold weather out. I don't know if we're going to get rid of the cold weather in February.
Right.
But at
As
least
long as
let's
it's not as cold as it was in January for about 10 days.
exactly. Yeah, look, and we got you mentioned a Super Bowl coming up between the the dreaded Niners and I'm
Yeah.
sure for a lot of people the dreaded Chiefs, having been there for
Yeah.
so many times, but you have the combine coming up. I'm not sure if I'll be getting out there to Indy this year for that, but
Okay.
we'll see. The Senior Bowl is underway, and I know you wrote about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Shrine Bowl. Don't sleep on that Shrine Bowl, Johnny.
Can't sleep on the Shrine Bowl and everything else that's going on in the pre-draft process right now. It's about to get really busy for those guys. It already is really busy for those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And spring ball, Penn Staters going through winter workouts right now at the Lash Building, and before we know it, we'll be talking to players, coaches ahead of a really important spring ball, and then you got summer and training camp, and then the season, Bob.
Yeah, I know. It's great. Johnny, as you know.
But it's still January, technically.
Yeah, I know. We're almost there.
We're almost there.
Next month it's a leap year, so it's 29 days next year, but it's still better than 30 or 31. Johnny, as you know, every once in a while, I like to just kind of freewheel it, try and just not let you know what's coming, but usually you respond like the champion that you are. This is not going to be any heavy lifting, but I thought, since we've been talking about it, the end of January, just kind of for the Penn State football fans, what did we learn? What did we learn, both in-state college with James Franklin's team? What did we learn maybe on the national level? What did we learn on the new Big Ten level? But I think there's a lot of different ways we could go. But when you think about some of the things that just transpired in this brutally cold month, after you got back from that warm, sunny vacation with your loved ones, and I'm sure you never wanted to leave that. When you think about some of the stuff that maybe just happened at Penn State, I have some ideas, but what sticks out to you about maybe some of the most meaningful things that transpired involving James Franklin's program in January?
Yeah, I just think in general, right, and it's with Penn State included, but college football as a whole, like, it was just a month of change. You had the portal that was open. You had coaches leaving. Penn State saw that. Mike Yurcich fired in November. If we're going back that far, Manny Diaz leaves in December, and Stacy Collins, the special teams coordinator, leaves to go back to Boise State. And so, Penn State, as I mentioned, the players are going through winter workouts right now. The coaches have been on the road recruiting. They've been, looking into the portal. They've been looking at their own roster. Not a mass exodus, in terms of Penn State players leaving, but that could be upcoming in April as the coaching staff and the program prepares for spring ball. That you're looking at a team and a program right now with 3 new coordinators, and so it's a coaching staff while they maintain their position coaches, retain those guys. That it is kind of a program in transition from that standpoint. You're going to have a new offense, a new defense. And while, like, I'm sure the players and Franklin might just say, hey, here's Manny Diaz's playbook. Go ahead and do that, Tom Allen. Like, Tom Allen's going to have his own identity and his own wrinkles and his own, thing he's doing. So,
Mm.
yeah, and like I said, you look across college football, and like Nick Saban retiring, and Kalen DeBoer leaves Washington and won't be Big Ten next year. Ohio State goes and racks up however many players from the portal and retains a bunch of guys. And you started to see, of course, like after the national title game, Jim Harbaugh leaves. Like maybe the biggest
I was
one.
waiting for you to get to that. I knew
Yeah,
you would.
as it pertains to Penn State. I mean, Michigan's not on the schedule till 2026, but still. So
Yeah.
a lot of change at Penn State, a lot of change at the Big Ten, a lot of change across the country. You saw a lot of people right after the national title game do like their way too early, top 25s. And I've already seen some of those same people, within the last couple of days come out with revised top 25s
Right.
only a few weeks later because so much has changed in college football. And I don't think Penn State, has been impervious to that.
Yeah. How about this? When it just comes to the way the transfer portal and kind of the movement is set up, in terms of what I learned is I think that there's definitely going to have to be a change, and I just think for the good of the sport, I get the fact that players, deserve the choice to move. Coaches do it all the time, but it just seems like it's kind of reached a little bit of insane proportions. I don't know. I don't want to use the word unmanageable, but I have to think that December and the month of January, I just think that for coaches to try and manage that situation, if it's, I don't want to say it's impossible, but I got to say that it is shortening the lives, I think, of some very talented college coaches. I'm not sure they need a lot of big changes, but the way it's set up right now, Johnny, do you think? I think what I've learned is I think they definitely have to step in and try and just add some structure to it, if that's the right word.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. Yeah, guardrails. Maybe it has been a word that's been thrown around quite a bit by college coaches across the country, including James Franklin. So, yeah, I think you could definitely take a hard look at what the portal is right now, how it's set up from a timing standpoint. I do think it's to the benefit of the players, certainly, in terms of just options available to them, that they have both a winter window and the spring window that opens for 15 days on April 15th. And just from a management standpoint, I mentioned an exodus is probably coming of like fringe players for Penn State because they're entering spring ball. They're going to enter spring ball as it stands right now with 99 scholarship players in the building, and you got to get to 85 by the time the season starts. So I kind of point to, I think that's almost like a positive though for Penn State in that like they're going to get down to 85. But that James Franklin and his staff have been able to convince a lot of players that, hey, there are snaps to be won, reps to be won in spring ball, and just try to have as much competition in the building and on the practice field as you possibly can. And so I think that, when you look at, some schools are losing 20, 30 guys, and, some coaching movement, has something to do with that as well. But I think it's almost a good problem for Penn State to have right now, that they have so much competition going into spring ball, and definitely some spots up for grabs. We talked about the wide receiver room. There's a few positions on this team that will hope to see 3-4 guys emerge from that cluster of players that really could transfer and go elsewhere. So, but yeah, I think there's definitely a conversation to be had in terms of the hectic, nature of this schedule with recruiting too, because you got, like I mentioned, the coaching staff's on the road all the time, looking to recruit now 2025 and 2026 guys, and they got to worry about people in their own building. But I also balance that with the fact that coaches can leave at any time, and so I'm all for player movement, Bob, but some guardrails would be nice.
Yep. It's the Blue White Breakdown, end of January edition. So excited about it. We're talking about kind of what we learned about college football, Penn State specifically. Johnny, when you talk about James Franklin and his recruiting in the month of January, a couple things I just wanted to ask you about. What did we learn maybe about? They've held a couple of visiting weekends already. I know they've gotten at least one offensive lineman a couple of weeks ago. what have we learned maybe about I guess it's not really the future of Penn State recruiting, but, when we look at 2025 and 2026, has anything in your mind kind of crystallized or taken shape about either their approach or where they kind of sit, or maybe what this class will look like maybe at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, it's difficult to sit here and say that in 2025 they're going to have X amount of commits, because you just don't know from a roster standpoint who will enter the portal. Not only now in April, but then it's very difficult to tell that sometimes. And right now they've got 8 guys in the 2025 class. One thing I think for sure is that they're going to have another quarterback. I mentioned Matt Zollers from Springford last week, that he was scheduled to visit this past weekend, but he actually ended up moving that to this upcoming weekend. He went down south to visit some schools as his recruitment heats up. So something to keep an eye on there. But Penn State's very much in on him and very much in on other quarterbacks too in this 2025 class. They already have one committed in Beckham Kritza, and wouldn't be surprised if this is a 2 quarterback class for Penn State. But it's one of those where it seems like they get a lot of their commits, in the summer, right? In June. June is always a big month for Penn State. And so I wouldn't expect it to be any different than that. Sure, you'll have guys commit, maybe Blue White weekend when you have so many guys on campus for the spring scrimmage. And so I would expect that as well. But yeah, it's difficult to say that things have really crystallized right now. But they're getting a lot of guys. I'll say this. They're getting a lot of guys on campus over the last 2 weekends and scheduled now for this upcoming weekend. Guys that have been on campus already a good bit. You look at even, for example, safety, Quinoa Winston, and Desi Jones, a wide receiver from New Jersey, 2025 4-stars that had been on campus already for games this past fall. And I think just that continuity, and programs across the country are doing this as well. But to keep up with those guys and guys that they've already recruited now, for a couple years, to really continue that pursuit. And I think that's going to pay dividends for this team, this program, this coaching staff in the coming months.
Johnny, let me give you a much more distinctively easier question about recruiting. What did we learn about maybe the upside of Cooper Cousins, who recently, I see a lot of people now view him as a 5-star offensive lineman. He was, I think, obviously, a coveted prospect before that, a 4-star guy. I think he was one of the very early commits to the class, but it just seems like the trajectory for this guy is pointing up, and that's a great sign, I think, for Penn State moving forward. They've had some really good offensive linemen sign with this program in recent years, but just about him in particular, it just seems like nationally now, a lot of people are really starting to get impressed with this kid.
Yeah, definitely. Cooper Cousins. He was a 4-star, now a 5-star on 3, elevated him. And he is really impressed, not only the evaluators when it comes to that side of it, but this coaching staff. I mean, Cooper was the first guy committed in the 2024 class from Yuri McDowell. And he has been no frills this whole process. He has been, just the level-headed kind of player that you want to not only help recruit other players to that 2024 class, which they signed in December, but he comes in as an early enrollee, one of the 16 guys that have enrolled early, into Penn State right now and going through winter workouts. And I mentioned last week on the podcast that it is difficult for freshmen, offensive linemen to come in and establish themselves and play a role as a freshman. But I think Cooper Cousins is one that can kind of buck that trend. I mean, you look at what he stands at right now. I mean, I think he's 6'6", 320 pounds. I think the expectation is that he'll begin his career at Penn State at center. A lot of times,
that's a big center.
It's a big center, but you look at the position right now at center, and Nick Dawkins, is there. I think Venga Ione will compete, for that spot as well. But I mean, man, if they decide to use Venga elsewhere, Cooper Cousins could be the backup center for this team in 2024. And you look at what Penn State normally does with offensive linemen who come in who can play multiple positions. A lot of time they'll start them at tackle. they'll start him at tackle, and then if they don't work out a tackle, they'll just move him inside. But I think it's telling that the expectation right now is that Cooper will be a center, starting off his Penn State career, and he's got that mental makeup, the kind of guy that needs to know the entire offense, make the checks at the line of scrimmage, communicate with everyone else. Like, he is that guy, and I think it's a really good sign for him, not only in 2024, but looking even beyond that into 2025.
Good points, all of them, Johnny. Here's some things. What did we learn? And this is one of the main ones I learned in January. I think I kind of knew I was going to learn it in December. I'm hoping I'm going to be proven wrong. I don't know how you feel about this. Johnny, what I think I learned is that the biggest question of the 2023 off season going into the fall of 2023, to me, kind of looms as the biggest question of 2024. For me, it's wide receiver. Absolutely. I know I'm not splitting the atom here with this theory. I know a lot of people think that, but the fact that it's still, I know they were able to add Julian Fleming, but the way the wideout room looked down the stretch or throughout 2023, the season, I know we're going to have a new offensive coordinator at Penn State. I know Marcus Hagans is now in his second year, but to me, I don't think it's a great sign that I don't know how much progress has been made in the last year going to, in the last 12 months. And it's a position other than Michigan. It's a position around college football that can change the game in a hurry. James talked about it all off season last year, that, you can be in a tight game and a receiver can go 75 yards and just completely change the complexion of a game. I look at what Penn State has, Johnny, and I don't think it's a good sign. I hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong a lot. I just don't feel good about kind of where they're at.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, this time last year, we were talking about the wide receiver room being probably the biggest question on this team going into the 2023 season. And then the 2023 season ended in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl, and the wide receiver room did not have a catch going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And there were plays that were made throughout the season. I don't mean to completely shortchange that room. Keandre Lambert-Smith, it looked like he was on the upward trajectory week one when he had that big play against West Virginia. He had the big play against Indiana. You even look down the list. Amari Evans, had a really nice touchdown against Michigan State in the regular season finale. As the co-offensive coordinators had taken over and had tried to put players in better position to succeed than Mike Yurcich did, frankly, as the offensive coordinator before he was fired. We talk about fringe players and opportunities to make an impact and emerge, in the winter and spring camp. And I look squarely at the wide receiver room because you have Julian Fleming coming in from Ohio State, former 5-star. That's a really good add. Even though he never really broke out at Ohio State, stuck behind a lot of first rounders, it's really difficult to do that. Undeniably a talented player, and I think elevates the wide receiver room upon arrival. Keandre Lambert-Smith is coming back, as he noted on social media. And Harrison Wallace, he dealt with injuries all throughout last season, and I don't think really got a chance to hit a groove. So those are your top three guys, but beyond that, Liam Clifford, Caden Saunders, Amari Evans, Malik McLean, who flashed early in the season but really fell off as really October went on. Dante Stevens transfers out. Like, this is a room that is still under question and will really until the fall. Like, we're going to be talking about Marcus Hagans' group for a while now. And I think on the flip side too, you look at who they're going to be going up against in spring ball and in the summer in the corner room, because I think that's also a question coming in now, because Kalen King, Johnny Dixon, Daquan Hardy, those guys are all gone. Joey Porter Jr. 2 seasons ago, those four made up a really good quartet. And with Manny Diaz and the defense that they ran, applying pressure and really being aggressive and disruptive, like, he knew and they knew that they could run man coverage and be, against everyone except for basically Marvin Harrison Jr., be safe in doing that. And now you look at a group that, you bring in AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber. I don't know if I'm stepping on your toes here, Bob. I don't know if this is what you're going to get to next, but
you never know. I like to surprise you. I'm a wild card. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. So you bring in two SEC transfers. You've got Zion Tracy and Kim Miller, who had a baptism by fire in the Peach Bowl.
Sure.
So I think those are the two biggest question marks, and two really, you come out of January, you come out of the portal, and you take stock. And that's what I'm doing this week, Bob, by the way. We're recording this on Tuesday. Over the next couple of days, I'll have some projected depth charts going into spring ball.
Love it.
It's a month away now at this point, so I think it's fair to take a look at what they'll have.
Yeah.
And I think the wide receiver room and the corner room are the two areas that will have the most scrutiny, that will have the most attention going into spring ball.
Yeah, good points. I'm looking forward to that projected depth chart. I know it's coming. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I know it'll be thorough, and I know the Penn State football fans will look forward to that from you on PennLive. Johnny, I want to close with this on this again. I just gotta keep saying it's January 30th. I'm super excited about it. I'm not freezing right now. As we close out the month of January, I'll tell you what I think I learned the most this month of January, and it does involve Penn State, but it's really about another school. What I learned is right now, I think right now, and I'm not just talking about in the Big Ten. It might be nationally. With the way that Ohio State is recruiting, with the way that they have their NIL program in place, and what they're able to do to keep players that could easily leave for the drafting, probably be second, third round picks, a lot of them, and what they're able to do to get really good players in the transfer portal to come to Ohio State because of their NIL program. What I learned is right now, in my mind, it's Ohio State and everybody else. And you better have – I just think the way that they've kind of approached things, I think they're a bit ahead of the curve. I'm not sure where Penn State is in their NIL program. I know it's gotten better. I know that James Franklin and Pat Kraft and a lot of prominent people, whether they're alumni, I know a lot of people have done a lot of hard work to try and get it up to speed, because James has talked about, a couple of years ago, they weren't where they needed to be. And I know they've made strides, but there's strides, Johnny, and there are leaps. And I just think what Ohio State's done, what I've learned is that they are looking good. And I think there's a lot of people, not just Penn State, that has some catching up to do.
Definitely. And I wanted to mention Ohio State earlier. This is a Penn State podcast, so I didn't want to.
But I mean, I think Penn State fans know this, and I think they're thinking the same thing that we're talking about.
Definitely. And Ohio State has for years been the program that I'm sure quietly James Franklin, or even not so quietly James Franklin, and Penn State players and fans have tried to catch and surpass at some point. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of boogeyman for Penn State, and you look at what they've done over the last month in player retention. Denzel Burke, Tui Moloau, like the list goes on there. Who they've added, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs from Alabama, even Julian Sayin, who was one of the top quarterbacks.
Don't forget about the quarterback.
I know. Well, Will Howard, of course, is going to be the starter and be the guy. But then you just look at the future of the program and what they've got.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Like they're able to take one of the top quarterbacks from one of the more recent recruiting classes, in Julian Sayin, and it's just Now maybe those who watched the NFL over the last few years in Alabama will look at Bill O'Brien and say that's an uninspiring hire. I think it's a pretty good hire, because what it allows Ryan Day to do is kind of step back and be a CEO and not have to worry about play calling. Mm-hmm. I think Ohio State won the month for college football, and that's not difficult just for Penn State to stomach. That's difficult for everyone in college football to stomach. But Ohio State is on the schedule. They come to Happy Valley in November, on November 2nd, the Bill O'Brien homecoming, and it's going to be a lot of really good players that the Buckeyes are bringing with them at that point too. And I think at this point, it's easy to overreact after a really good month, but when you have the month they kind of had, I think them and Georgia are probably favorites for the national title heading into the 2024 season. A lot can change. It's January. But what I learned as well is that Ohio State is a well-oiled machine right now, Bob.
Yeah. And Penn State fans, if you're listening to this or watching this and saying those guys, all they ever do is poke. They're always negative. I'm going to go glass half full. All right. Julian Fleming plays to his 5-star ranking. A couple of young receivers step up. Tyler Warren, NFL tight end, that I think is a huge bonus. They got him back. Nick Singleton builds upon what he did the last 2 games of 2023, the bowl game and the Michigan State game, the team with Katron Allen. Cooper Cousins earned some playing time. The new OC, Andy Kotelnicki, they take to his offense. It confounds teams right from the start. The transfer portal corners, both of them work out and team with some young corners with a lot of promise. And they barely skip a beat. Tom Allen, his reputation as a defensive coach proves to be true. This is probably the most talented bunch of defensive players he's ever had a chance to work with. And it's a pretty seamless transition from Manny Diaz. All of that stuff comes to pass. And Ohio State comes in here and, it's going to be one of those games. It's going to be one of the top games of the Big Ten. All of that stuff is certainly possible. But it just seems like right now it's a lot of what ifs. And I think Penn State, there's a lot of progress that has to be made. They can make it. But I think what we just did for the last, 25 minutes, Johnny, I think it's a pretty fair assessment of where Penn State is 1 month into 2024. I don't know how you feel about it, but a lot can change in the offseason.
Definitely. And we went 26 minutes and 30 seconds without mentioning the name Drew Aller.
Yeah. He's probably thanking us for that. He's like, God, stop talking about me.
And look, I think that is, we talked about the wide receivers and the corners from a positional standpoint. I think what I'll be looking forward to most is seeing how those 2 groups develop. But Drew, with the new offensive coordinator and Andy Kotelnicki, we talked all year about how when assessing Drew's first year as a starter, it's a little bit of everything, right? It's a little bit of him. It's a little bit of, the receivers. It was a little bit of Mike Yurcich. I think Andy Kotelnicki and what I've watched from him do at Kansas, the stats kind of back it up. His creativity, the way he runs his offense, the way he gets his guys in space and sizes defenses and put defensive coordinators on their heels and keeps them guessing, I think will do wonders for Drew Aller. Is that enough to beat Ohio State and to make a run in the college football playoff? Like, again, what ifs? That's kind of what we're dealing with right now in January with a new OC and a quarterback who's coming off a year, trying to build off the positives and get over and overcome, the challenges that he had against, top competition this past year. But I do think Kotelnicki was a great hire when it was made almost 2 months ago now. And I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see strides from Drew. And we're going to have to wait until fall for that because, we're only going to see so much in spring. They're not going to, they're probably going to keep it pretty, vanilla in the spring game. But I do think, we're looking half glass full here. I do think Andy Kotelnicki is going to make a really good impact on this program and on Drew Aller's trajectory specifically.
Johnny, that's how you close on a positive Penn State note. There's no way I could have done it as well as you did just now. Shout out to you and your Liverpool hat. I think it brings a lot of class to this podcast as I continue to wear Dallas Cowboys gear, those stinking Cowboys. You classed it up. I'm proud of you. Guys, we'll be back next week to talk about what's new with Penn State football. And it'll be February the next time Johnny and I chat. I know there's an extra day. It's 29 days, but I can live with it. I'm hoping for weather in the 40s next week. Johnny, good talking with you, and we'll talk next week.